A key recent trend is the growing importance of HR expertise on boards.
Today, people are the primary asset. Having HR representation on the board makes it possible to identify risks that are not reflected in financial statements. The war has shown that a business can lose offices, equipment, and logistics, but if a business loses its people, it loses everything. Women are still underrepresented on boards. The reasons, of course, include stereotypes and invisibility.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Board of Directors with Sergiy Bulavin channel. Today our guest is Antonina Kurets. Antonina, welcome.
Thank you, Sergey.
Antonina is a certified people and HR expert. She has extensive experience, over 20 years, in senior leadership roles related to HR in international companies. Antonina is also actively involved with the Women Leadership Academy and Women Leaders for Ukraine. Antonina, as we mentioned, a key trend in recent years has been the growing role of HR expertise on boards. Could you please tell us how you became a member of the advisory board of Kids of Ukraine and how important HR expertise is specifically for this board?
Sergey, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It has been a pleasure to watch and follow your work and how you promote board governance, as this is still a relatively new direction for Ukrainian companies. At the same time, it is an extremely important direction for Ukrainian businesses, as it demonstrates that Ukrainian companies are truly moving toward the high standards of European and global business practices. That is why I am very happy to be involved.
Thank you very much. That is truly motivating.
It really is an important mission that you are leading. So to answer your first question about how I joined the Kids of Ukraine board, where I am now serving as chair, I would add one important element to your introduction, the power of networking. You mentioned that I am a member of the Women Leaders for Ukraine community. It was there that I met Irina Papusha, who was also a guest on your channel. After a conversation with her, when she asked about my background and aspirations, I shared this goal with her. After that, she initially invited me to join the advisory board of Kids of Ukraine, and later I became its chair. Was this a deliberate step for me, and what motivated it? It was a very intentional step, and in fact it was driven by a combination of two factors that are very important to me. First, a conscious desire to contribute to society, something that became especially pronounced with the outbreak of the war. Second, it was a natural opportunity that emerged through my professional volunteer activities. Kids of Ukraine works with children who have been most affected by the war. I felt that my experience in international companies, in the Big Four and at the UN, experience in people management, process transparency, and financial accountability could provide the organization with greater resilience and trust. My main motivation was not status or position, but the eyes of the children and the eyes of the mothers who bring their children to the Kids of Ukraine centers. They truly needed support, and I could clearly sense that. It was a step driven by both the heart and the profession at the same time.
So, the core motivation was to contribute to a meaningful and noble cause.
Right.
Returning to the growing role of HR, there are indeed many international surveys and studies today that show how critical this expertise is for boards, supervisory boards, advisory boards, and boards of directors. For example, one study shows that HR professionals or the company's chief HR officer participate in almost all supervisory board meetings. This clearly indicates a growing role. At the same time, we must acknowledge that, unfortunately, the overall level of expertise among mid-level HR professionals in Ukraine still requires improvement, and HR expertise at the board level can significantly support and accelerate this development.
I agree with you that the demand for HR professionals to serve on boards is indeed increasing, and this is a global trend. It is encouraging that this trend is also taking hold in Ukraine. In fact, the reason the role of HR on boards is so important today is that people are the primary asset. In conditions of uncertainty, issues of culture, organizational culture, leadership succession, motivation, and the engagement of key specialists become truly critical. HR representation on the board makes it possible to identify these risks that are not reflected in financial statements. This includes team burnout, the loss of leaders, and the company's ability to execute its strategy. Without addressing these factors, the board's strategic decisions may remain only on paper. If we speak about the Ukrainian market and Ukrainian businesses more broadly, just a few years ago, HR was perceived as a support function. Today, more and more companies are inviting HR as a true strategic partner, closely involved in strategy. The war has demonstrated that a business can lose offices, equipment, and logistics. But if a business loses its people, it loses everything. Ukrainian businesses now clearly understand this. How is HR expertise valuable for the board? HR experts bring a systemic perspective. Whether the culture supports the strategy, whether there is a succession plan, whether teams are prepared for crisis situations, these are precisely the blind spots that owners often do not see. Speaking from the perspective of my current employer, during the war we managed to preserve 90% of critical processes. This was achieved through timely and well-considered decisions related to safety, flexibility, and support for teams.
In fact, what you have just mentioned directly relates to business continuity and leadership succession policies. Unfortunately, there are still very few boards of directors in Ukraine that address these issues in a systematic way. Perhaps HR expertise could be the trigger that enables boards of directors to focus more consistently on these topics.
And if I may continue your thought, I would say that HR is also a bridge between people and strategy, because in a crisis, it is HR that signals the risks. People burnout, severe fatigue, turnover, and skills gaps. Within business continuity planning, the role of HR is to ensure that these plans work not only on paper, but in real life. Business continuity is, in fact, impossible without motivated and, most importantly, protected people.
Absolutely. And this is indeed highly relevant in our current reality, when unfortunately we do not know what tomorrow will bring. Both succession planning and BCP are critically important. If we look at the traditional approach, HR was generally seen as a support function. And for example, a person with a CEO background was often considered sufficient to cover HR expertise as well. We now understand that this no longer works, and that focused, dedicated expertise is required. In your view, to what extent can HR help an organization become more stable and resilient?
HR representation on the board is in fact capable of making resilience truly systemic. I have spoken a lot today about systematization and keep coming back to this concept. Historically, it was rarely associated with the HR function. Today, however, HR experts are the ones who bring, drive, and demonstrate how the people dimension, often perceived as something abstract or overly creative, can in fact be systematized. That is precisely why you are right. CEOs are beginning to realize that HR expertise is not just about being able to talk to people, conduct trainings, or run interviews. It goes far beyond that. This expertise lays the foundation for a culture of readiness for change, which is what resilience truly means when approached correctly. Because resilience is not about reacting chaotically to a crisis. It is at its core a matter of psychological resilience of teams. This is when HR effectively prepares the next generation of leaders, creates a supportive environment, and this is exactly what the board must view from a strategic perspective.
If we imagine a business, this business has an owner, and the owner decides to establish a board. Typically, the owner focuses on market entry, markets, ROI, and so on. But how can the owner understand that they need an HR professional or someone with strong HR expertise as a member of the board?
Finances can be measured in reports, and you are absolutely right. This is the first place everyone looks. Human-related risks are often invisible. They only show up later in the reports. Too late, when it is already difficult to change anything. This is precisely where HR helps prevent what can ultimately destroy a business. The loss of strong key people, the erosion of trust, and a loss of trust is also measured in financial terms. The breakdown of culture and high turnover, which are also very clearly measurable in money. Without addressing this, any strategy remains nothing more than words on paper.
Absolutely. And in your view, in which direction should HR professionals develop? For example, those who are currently working in executive roles or within the company's HR function. In which direction should they grow and what expertise should they acquire in order to plan a career in non-executive roles?
In my view, HR must go beyond the boundaries of its traditional profession and speak the language of both finance and strategy. HR must understand technology, automation, and how these elements impact the business. This is exactly what shapes an entirely new reality, one that is very much needed today. For me personally, studying at Harvard and with CIPD was a pathway to becoming an equal voice at the board table.
There are many research showing that gender diversity, and diversity more broadly, leads to improved company performance and more effective overall results. In your view, what is the situation in Ukraine today? Is it balanced, for example, from the perspective of gender representation?
In reality, women are still underrepresented on boards and in top executive positions. The reasons, of course, include stereotypes, invisibility, and limited access to networks, particularly communities that bring women leaders together. My community, Women Leaders for Ukraine, provides excellent access to networking, serves as a powerful platform for learning, for elevating expertise, and for creating opportunities for realization and impact. At the same time, I must say that the situation is changing, and today there are already companies that understand that diversity is not a formality, but a real competitive advantage. Different perspectives significantly reduce risks and improve the quality of decision-making. The Women Leaders for Ukraine community has recently launched a project that measures gender equality within companies. This is the first initiative of its kind in Ukraine, and I am truly happy and proud to be part of a community that is implementing this in my home country. Companies will compete for the recognition of being named and nominated as those that adhere to, promote, and actively support women in advancing to leadership positions. That is why I am very pleased to see this trend changing.
According to some studies, the share of women in top management of Ukrainian companies exceeds the average European indicator. However, when it comes to the proportion of women on boards of directors or supervisory boards, Ukraine unfortunately still lags significantly behind European countries and the global average. How could this be addressed?
I tend to believe that this requires active advocacy, in the sense that women need support in challenging skepticism and dismantling the stereotypes that still exist in society. On the other hand, it is also essential to develop educational initiatives and actively involve women in learning programs. I believe this has definitely improved the situation. In particular, you also mentioned the Women Leadership Academy in your introduction. As the leader of this project, I clearly understand the significant role that education and learning play in ensuring that development happens faster, more naturally, and more effectively. Very often people simply lack basic knowledge. What a board actually does, how it operates, what happens at the table, and how one can become involved. This is a very common mindset among women. Perhaps I don't yet know enough or have enough experience to participate. This is exactly what can be addressed through raising awareness. And this is true globally, not only in Ukraine. That is why I emphasized at the beginning that your mission in this area is also extremely important.
Thank you very much. And of course, the mission of your organization is directly focused on this subject as well. How do you feel about the idea of potential quotas? Among women in business, there are very different views on this. Some believe quotas can be a useful trigger, while others feel they may undermine the perception of an individual's professionalism.
I understand the skepticism around quotas, but in some cases they are necessary. Necessary as a transitional mechanism to move the system off dead center. However, quotas do not change culture. Culture is changed by conditions, mentorship, networks, and access to opportunities. I see my mission as creating these conditions for future women leaders.
This includes networking, targeted education, and knowledge sharing, including the exchange of best practices, career paths, and experiences.
Yes, absolutely.
In many cases, quotas lead to a focus on formal compliance, where meeting the quota impacts appearances more than substance. In other words, sometimes a person is invited, ostensibly to support diversity quotas, but does not actively contribute to value creation for the company. How can this be avoided?
First and foremost, women should not be appointed for the sake of the checkbox simply because they are women. That leads to 100% erosion of trust. Every board member must bring clear, concrete expertise. Diversity is not a number in a report, it is the quality of decisions. Owners must clearly define what each board member contributes, regardless of gender. On the other hand, if I may, a few pieces of advice for women candidates. First of all, visibility. This is the biggest barrier, invisibility. What do I mean by that? I am an expert, I know a lot, I am deeply involved in various projects. I accumulate all this experience, but no one knows about it. My recommendation is to speak publicly, write, and share cases and insights. LinkedIn is a very strong and powerful tool for this. The second point is building a board career. Defining your unique expertise is critical. What is it? Finance, ESG, risk, human resources, or human capital? And being ready to demonstrate it with data, metrics, and concrete examples. I am confident that if you look deeper into expertise, every leader has something valuable to contribute, provided she has already built solid, meaningful experience. As for barriers, of course, they exist. There are many of them, from the stereotypes I mentioned earlier to limited access to opportunities. But they can be overcome through networking, strong professional communities, relationships, and very systematic work on one's personal positioning. I would like to emphasize this point and thank you for the question, because it is important and offers women more concrete guidance on how to overcome these challenges.
Indeed, board work is very interesting and attractive. Not from the perspective of compensation, but from the opportunity to feel truly needed and to apply one's expertise. On meaningful projects and in interesting companies, often more than one at the same time. That said, there are also challenges and downsides associated with board work, which can be demanding for everyone, both men and women. What do you think?
Obviously, a board role requires an independent perspective and at the same time accountability. If we talk about risks, yes, they do not always materialize, but in the context of Ukraine's recovery, which we are already discussing and hoping for, it is critical that investors and partners see transparency and control. An advisory board is, in fact, a way to build trust and mitigate risks. Why is this important now, and why am I mentioning it in response to your question? Because investments will inevitably come to Ukraine. And the first question international partners will ask is how transparent the governance is. The presence of a board is a clear signal that the company operates according to international standards, that the company is governed with the involvement of independent experts. This significantly strengthens a company's ability to attract investment. That is my view. At the same time, if we speak about the risks faced by members of advisory boards, standing up for an independent opinion, yes, there are risks, but having that courage is critical, absolutely critical.
Without it, it is impossible to be independent and to articulate an unbiased, independent perspective.
And this is probably one of the traits that distinguishes Ukrainians today and is increasingly recognized worldwide.
Yes, absolutely. What would you recommend in terms of career building for those who would like to join boards? We have talked about visibility. Would it be useful, for example, to deliberately build a personal brand for this purpose?
Absolutely. Otherwise, how would people know, what you can do, what experience you have gained, and what expertise you bring? Speaking for myself, I also work on this very actively. I try to approach it somewhat philosophically, because we take nothing with us, and sharing our experience is essential to strengthening others. By strengthening others, you ultimately build a stronger team and environment around you. My goal, my reason for doing this and for showing my work is not just for myself. You become a role model, which is also wonderful, and people are drawn to grow and develop. This is something I believe Ukraine really needs to promote, that people should not be afraid to talk about their deep expertise, to show themselves, including in the context of board roles. It is very important to clearly define your value proposition and understand why you would be interesting and relevant to a board. That is why developing a strong personal brand as an expert is so critical.
It is often said that women tend to be more restrained in assessing their own expertise and professional capabilities. How can this be overcome? Because it truly holds many back. It prevents women, for example, from applying for board opportunities simply because they do not meet 100% of the listed requirements.
From my perspective, one important step is to reduce perfectionism, as women are often prone to this trait. It is very helpful in building expertise, but not very helpful when it comes to presenting or communicating that expertise. You expressed it very well. Women are often more restrained in putting themselves forward. As a board expert, I would say that this kind of restraint is often... This hesitation usually stems from lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge about what? That's why it's so important to support women through education, sharing experiences, and role models. This is why carrying a mission focused on information and awareness is so critical. In this area of expertise, it's essential to create training programs, promote them, and spread awareness. This helps women understand, okay, now I see the path, I understand how others got there, and I realize I can also participate and present myself. I believe this can be a very strong step forward. It provides a powerful push for women to step into this space, increasingly share their expertise, and showcase their capabilities, especially in the context of the war. Many of them had to step into leadership roles suddenly, replacing men who went to the front lines, and this happened very frequently. And over the course of the war, they have already gained incredible expertise. These are crisis managers as of today. That's why I encourage every woman to develop, to learn, to join various networks, to present herself, gain knowledge, and ultimately showcase this expertise to the world, starting with Ukraine so others can also be inspired. And truly, this is how the broader trend of popularizing the personal brand as an expert has been spreading.
In Ukraine, there are two schools that specialize specifically in corporate governance. One is the Ukrainian Corporate Governance Academy, and the other is the Corporate Governance Institute course, conducted in collaboration with the Corporate Governance Professional Association. And perhaps, if top female executives are interested in continuing their careers in non-executive director roles, these courses would be a great place to start. They provide the opportunity to learn more about board work and to meet both current corporate directors and aspiring board members.
Yes, it's excellent that you mentioned this because not everyone is aware of these programs or reads profiles in detail. It's crucial to know where you can acquire this knowledge. These courses not only show the path forward but also provide perspective and a strong motivational push. All right, I'll start with learning is a good approach if there are doubts about how to begin.
Both organizations assist with placements. When there is a need for a board member or non-executive director, these networks inform their participants and someone may become interested in a specific board position in a particular company. Antonina, thank you very much for this engaging conversation and for your very interesting and useful insights. I am confident that they will be both valuable and inspiring for our audience, particularly for women leaders who are focusing their careers on non-executive roles and board positions.
Thank you again for your questions and for your commitment to highlighting the potential of boards for women leaders and why boards themselves need to continue developing. Thank you again for this program and the opportunity. I was very glad to participate.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. See you in the next episodes.